Anybody who's been outside first thing in the morning waiting for the bus in eastern Idaho knows what happens with your breath. All you have to do is look in front of your face. Blow as hard as you can, see how far that mist can go, put a mask on, see what changes. So even if it's blowing out to the sides, blowing up in your glasses and fogging them, you've learned what the benefit is of wearing a mask. And if we do that consistently, we'll reduce the transmission rates. What we're learning from our experience here in the Upper Valley is that we're not all that different. We're not all that exceptional. We kind of rode the coattails of being isolated geographically earlier in the year. We also tend to ride the coattails of the swings in our seasons as well. We've just learned that what happens over the holidays is that people spend time together as families. They don't get tested. They probably are spreading the coronavirus, and then it will take 2 to 3 weeks for us to see the results of that in the numbers that are reported. One of the other things I hope people aren't spending too much time on is what those numbers look like. And the reason why is we're not really doing what a scientist would do to measure transmission rates. We are not testing a random sample of the population. We're not going out there and testing asymptomatic people to know what the burden of the virus is in our community. And quite frankly, those who are spreading it are likely to be young and interacting with their peers on a regular basis. So if we started testing them randomly, choosing 10 children at school as they arrive each day and reporting those data, we'd have a better idea of what the real burden of the virus is in the community. But quite frankly, that probably doesn't matter. Our kids should be going to school. They are less likely to have long-term effects from the virus, but they are likely to spread it to other family members and ultimately to grandma and grandpa who might be at great risk for complications from the coronavirus. So when those kids have the opportunity and they're with their peers, they should be putting masks on. One of the things that we're really looking forward to is the vaccine. And actually, I had my second vaccination yesterday. Probably for most of us, it's going to feel a lot like getting the flu vaccine. So I've been a little bit achy in my arm. I've had a little bit more tiredness than usual, but beyond that, I'm still functional. And unless you've had a severe reaction to an injection in the past, there's every reason in the world to be vaccinated as soon as you can. Part of that is my personal protection. But the bigger part is, again, the same reason that we wear masks. It's to be kind to our neighbor. And by being vaccinated as quickly as possible, that's the quickest way for us to see an end to this virus in our community. I think everybody's tired of the coronavirus. Everybody wants to just go back to normal. But in reality, the only way that we're going to be able to achieve that is not only to be vaccinated, but for all of us to be vaccinated in a relatively short period of time. We're still learning how long the antibodies from the vaccination keep us immune to the coronavirus. And as time goes on, we're going to have to be patient, because if I tell you that it's 90 days today, next week, I might be able to tell you it's 120 days. And in 2 weeks, I might be able to tell you that the vaccination actually lasts for 6 months. But for the time being, we know that the sooner that we can get the majority of the population vaccinated, the more likely it is that we're actually able to go back to normal. I had my second vaccination yesterday. Here's my ratty little mask. The effectiveness of getting rid of the coronavirus in our community is going to be dependent actually on 2 things. One is a sufficient number being vaccinated. But the second part is reducing the overall rate of transmission. So for the time being, it's going to be really crucial that even those who are vaccinated continue to remain socially distant. that they continue to wear masks, because we're not going around with a little badge on saying, I'm only going to associate with those who have been vaccinated. And what we're not entirely sure of is whether or not vaccination means that I can't spread it to somebody else. We know right now that vaccination means that I am less likely to have symptoms after being exposed to the coronavirus. But we're still working out the details of what immunity actually means. If we wear masks in public, that reduces the risk of me transmitting the virus to multiple people. And when we talk about herd immunity, it has everything to do with what the potential is of me infecting several people in my interactions each day, rather than just one or two. Right now, again, we don't know what the full benefit of immunization is. And the studies, which were preliminarily published before we could acquire all the data regarding antibodies and their persistence and the rates of what we would think of as immunity, meaning I can't get it, are still coming. And that's why I'm saying things are changing. It may be that you are potentially still infectious. We hope not, and we think probably not. But for the time being, so that we can reduce the overall risk of transmission in the community, we're needing to be compliant to just those simple things that we know to do. Washing our hands, wearing a mask when we're out in public, and staying reasonably distant from people, particularly when we're in close confines. The difficulty here is that we have to acknowledge that many of the people who get coronavirus aren't sick at all. And it's those people who we're trying to guard against. And it's not that they have any ill intent. We're all just trying to live our lives normally, but we have to acknowledge that any person, regardless of whether or not they're manifesting symptoms, may be not only carrying but spreading the coronavirus. It's an individual person that has to take upon themselves responsibility of realizing that they might be the one person who makes a difference. And if we all take that upon ourselves, then we will make a difference as a whole. There's been some concern about the potential side effects of receiving the vaccine. And the immune system is a wonderful thing. What we want it to do is recognize that there's an invader in the body and to produce specialized missiles to go out and actually recognize and inactivate those invaders. And so with anything foreign to the body, we ought to hope that there's some recognition, and that's usually manifest in simple things like achiness or tiredness, occasionally a rash. It's the kinds of things that we've learned to associate with seasonal allergies or pet allergies. They're simple things that, when experienced, can usually be easily mitigated by taking a Tylenol or an ibuprofen or Benadryl. If people have serious reactions, obviously we want to know, and we want to take care of those appropriately. But based on the available data, the risk of a serious reaction is very, very low. The second time a person gets a vaccine, they've already been exposed once, and we hope that the immune system has been primed and already has a pretty good armamentarium of those specialized missiles. So again, we ought to hope that the second time around, we actually might expect a bit more in terms of the immune system's reaction. Once again, that tells us that the system is working, that our body's recognizing this as an invader and appropriately inactivating it so that we don't get sick when we come across the real coronavirus in the future. The CDC is doing a very good job of tracking everybody every day who's willing to log into their website about what kinds of symptoms they're having as a result of the vaccination. So I get a text reminder within the first week, probably daily, asking me, how do I feel? And it asks me with a little smiley face or a little meh face or a frowny face. And then you talk about what kinds of symptoms you've been feeling. So that's the post-marketing, if you will, evaluation. But we have tens of thousands of people who are enrolled in the clinical trials. And we know from their experience, which was published and then reviewed by the FDA expert committee and then the full FDA committee, that these data were among the most positive that had ever been seen. So the usual tactics of any critic are three things: fear, uncertainty, and despair. And we've seen lots of despair in the community and in the world right now. There's reason to be uncertain about what the future holds. And certainly there's an awful lot of fear-mongering going on out there. And a lot of it centers around what's going on with the validation of the vaccine itself. I can safely say that there's been no more scrutiny leveled at any public health study in the history of the world than there has been bringing these coronavirus vaccines to the public. So the data are freely available. The rates of serious complications from the vaccinations are far lower than anyone had reason to expect. And generally speaking, there's not a safer vaccination that can be received at this point than the coronavirus vaccine. One of the very unique things about the currently available coronavirus vaccines, whether it's the Pfizer or the Moderna vaccine, is that these have been specifically engineered. And what we mean by that is that we have sequenced the architectural plans of the virus, and we know what it wants to do. We've taken bits of that plan, which are unique to the coronavirus, and we've reverse engineered them, or in other words, just made a portion of the architectural plan so that our body will then make those little spike proteins, and our body will learn to recognize them and to fight them. The beauty is that we've removed all the instructions from the virus that allow it to be virulent. In other words, that allow it to replicate and be passed on to somebody else. So in this way, we're not dealing with an inactivated live virus that has some risk of being transmitted to others. We're not even dealing with other viral components or machinery that will allow this virus to replicate rapidly in the host. So in this case, we've taken the best of what we know technologically about viruses and engineered perhaps the best approach to endorse an immune response within our bodies and avoid the potential complications of vaccines. One of the ways that we have learned as humans to acquire information is from our trusted friends and associates. That's become tremendously easy now in the age of social media. You see something that looks funny or maybe even plausible, and all you have to do is, with a couple of clicks, share it with all of your friends. If you come across something that makes some crazy or wild claim about the safety or efficacy of the coronavirus vaccine, talk to your provider. There are actually good sources of information, both available to us online and in person. And if, like most of us, you want to get your information from somebody you trust, then just call your doctor, and they'll be happy to talk with you about your concerns. The initial recommendation are based on the fact that it appeared about half of the people who had one vaccination with the current dosing were resistant to getting the coronavirus afterwards. As we get that second vaccination, it appears that the risk of being symptomatic with coronavirus after exposure is probably less than 5%. So there's a significant improvement in the risk of having infection after the second vaccination. And we're still learning this, but it may well be that the second vaccination confers a longer immunity upon a person, maybe even than getting the coronavirus itself. We're waiting to see what happens, but data that were just published earlier today say that not only may this last weeks or months, but maybe even years. A lot of people are anxiously awaiting their opportunity to be vaccinated. I'm with you. I wanted to be the first guy in line when the vaccine became available to my group. Right now, we're trying to find an equitable and safe way to get those who are most at risk vaccinated as quickly as possible. We're having to deal with some of the problems associated with making a fairly complex vaccine. And right now, that's a bit of a shortage. So our public health advisors are working very hard to try and figure out how to phase in vaccinations. Right now, there are different stages that are published on the Idaho Public Health website that someone can easily access. So in conclusion, this is pretty simple. Let's not make it more complex than it needs to be. All you have to do to spread the coronavirus is walk around, talk with your friends as if nothing was going on. If you want to make a difference, all you have to do is put a mask on, stay a little bit further away, and when you have the opportunity, get vaccinated. That's all we're asking. If your friends forget to wear a mask one day, just kindly invite them to wear it. Carry an extra one with you. If you know a friend who's eligible for the vaccine and hasn't got it yet, encourage them to do so. And if you haven't gotten the vaccine already and are eligible for it, go get yours today.